Okay, so let's begin. I think the best place to start is to go through the difference between Piaget and Vygotsky, because they kind of cover same things but in different ways. Uh, and so that'll cover two of the big ones that are on there that a lot of people said that they need help with. Uh, so Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky are both all about cognitive development and how kids develop cognitively through childhood. Um, but there's a difference on how they do it, both people say. Piaget's the way kids develop in Piaget's idea is through interaction with the environment. It's through manipulation of objects and understanding conceptual ideas and things like that. So through interaction with the environment, kids learn and develop cognitively, developmentally. Vygotsky says, though, it's through social interaction. And so we're going to start really with Vygotsky, and then I'll go back to the stages of Piaget. With Vygotsky, it's about social interaction. Vygotsky's big thing is that kids learn and grow cognitively, but they only have like a specific amount. Think like a circle. Now, within that circle is the things that kids can do. All right. Now, outside of the circle is things that they can't do. Right. They can only do things they can. They can't do the things they can't. But when they have assistance from others, parents, teachers, siblings, etc., all of a sudden that inner circle has a circle around it. That circle around is called the zone of proximal development, the ZPD. And that zone of proximal development is basically what it does is it allows the kid to go beyond their normal abilities, to go into that zone, but only with assistance. Now, once they've gotten enough assistance, their zone of what they can do, it grows bigger. And with more assistance, then that ZPD, the proximal development, grows further and further and further. So that's really what Vygotsky is all about. Vygotsky is about social interaction, and the way that we do this is not just talking, but it's also through scaffolding, through building, giving this assistance. You know, if a kid needs help doing something that they can't do, then you let the kid do what they can, and then you help them with that extra step so that they get to that place where they can't. Eventually, they'll get to it without help, and then what they can do can grow bigger. Piaget, on the other hand, is more about interaction with the environment. So for Piaget, it's really all about there's four stages. The first stage is called the sensory motor stage. All of this should be in your notes, your text, whatever. So I'm not going to go super detailed through it. Sensory motor stage, biggest thing is that it's all about manipulation of the environment, of things with the environment, with their senses and with their motor skills. So they pick up objects and they manipulate it and they touch it. And they might put their mouth on it or things like that because they're trying to feel it through touch and manipulate it with their motor skills. The biggest thing in this stage is object permanence. So at the beginning of this stage, obviously they're infants. They have nothing except, they're alive. But now by the time they finish this stage, which is about 18 months, they've definitely developed object permanence, where that's, like peekaboo. Like if they know that the thing behind, like if you cover something up with a blanket, they know what's there hasn't disappeared. Whereas before they might. The second stage is called the pre-operational stage. Pre-operational stage is about, 18 months to about 5 years old, 5 or 6, give or take. And in the pre-operational stage, you start to see children really kind of understand conceptual ideas. Certain conceptual ideas, though, are not open to them. One is called conservation. That was like one of the things he highlighted. And that's like if you have a tall glass and a short glass, but the short glass is wider. Because we're older, that the tall glass that's skinnier and the short glass that's wider has the same amount of liquid. But a kid at that age doesn't. They see the taller glass and they think there's more. So that's conservation, and they do develop it by the time they get to the third stage, which is the concrete operational stage. Another hallmark of concrete operational stage, or actually of the pre-operational stage, is animism, where they bring things to life. That's, again, things in their environment. So like, having a tea party with stuffed animals or things like that. And then the concrete operational stage, mathematical transformation is a big thing there. With mathematical transformation, they understand that if you give 2 plus 5 equals 7, and then you say, what's 7 minus 5? They'll know that it's 2. A kid in the second stage, in the pre-operational stage, won't have that. And then finally, then there's the fourth stage, which is the formal operational stage, and that's cause and effect logic. It's the potential for morality. They may not get it till adolescence, but it's the potential for that moral reasoning and trying to like work things out, and the ideas of right and wrong are some of the big things that you see within those stages. All right, that's Piaget and Vygotsky. Anybody have any questions? I'll give you guys a little bit of time in case you need to write something. Okay. If you need to ask, I'm going to start on the next one real soon. Okay, we're going to keep going. Okay, so that was Piaget and that was Vygotsky. You guys also need Kohlberg and Erikson. Those are the ones that everybody said that they need covered. And obviously, this is the stuff that we didn't cover in class. So I totally get why you don't have it. And it's probably the hardest stuff of development. Like, it's not that it's hard, it's just that it can be confusing in terms of getting mixed up from one to another. Okay, so we'll do Erikson and then we'll do Kohlberg. Erikson, there's a lot of stages. There's 8 of them. I'm going to just run through them real fast because obviously going in depth is going to take up way too much time. So Erikson has, the big thing with Erikson is that there's 8 stages of psychosocial development. What that means is that each stage of a person's life, from infancy until death, has a social conflict, a conflict that needs to be resolved. And it can be resolved in one way or another. And what Erikson says is that what you take out of that conflict, how it's resolved, you carry that with you for the rest of your life. So, for example, stage 1 of Erikson is trust versus mistrust. And so all of these are like conflicts. That's why it's all like verses. But it's trust versus mistrust. And basically what that means is there's like an infant, and does the infant get its needs met? If a person gives it assistance and it stops crying and things like that, well, then great. Now the infant has developed trust and will carry trust with it throughout the rest of their life. But if there's that infant that doesn't get its diaper changed and doesn't get fed and is constantly hungry and doesn't get that attachment, then they're going to carry mistrust with them and have trust issues for the rest of their life. At least that's what Erikson says. So that's kind of the idea behind it, is that there's these social conflicts. And so with that in mind, here are the 8. So the first one is trust versus mistrust, infancy, right around there. The second one, I'm sorry, I need the list on this one. There's just so many of them. I get them mixed up sometimes, which is understandable. And people are going to see this on the video that I'm going and taking a look at it. I just need the conflicts. I can explain them just fine. Okay, the second one is called autonomy versus shame. With autonomy versus shame, it's toddlers and stuff like that. It's, can I do things for myself or can't I? So like a kid who's 3 years old wants to learn to tie his own shoes. And so then he, can either do it by himself or he carries that shame complex with them. All right. The third stage is initiative versus guilt. So for this one, it's will I kind of take charge and kind of do things for myself? Will I take the initiative, or will I feel like maybe I can't do that on my own? In childhood, it's industry versus inferiority. And what that means is basically you've got a kid who can work hard and accomplish things and grow as a person, or they're just going to say, I suck at this. Sports is a good example of this. Some kids are great at sports. They work really hard. Some kids get it naturally. Some kids are willing to work hard, but those kids that don't get it naturally, that can't put that work in, can't just do that on their own, then they feel that inferiority of like, I suck at playing basketball or something like that. So that's kind of that idea. Adolescence is identity versus role confusion. That's where a child, a preteen, middle schooler is asking, who am I? Like, what kind of person am I? I'm going to experiment with all sorts of different things. Hairstyle, the people I hang out with, and so on and so forth. All of these are social conflicts because they involve other people. Uh, and then you have the later part of adolescence, which is intimacy versus isolation. That's like late teens and 20s, where am I going to find a partner, or am I going to live alone and be that cat person? Uh, so that's obviously, a big social conflict. The seventh one that like I am in is called generativity versus stagnation. So do I accomplish things as an adult and I can say like, this is my life and I can do things correctly? Or am I just going to be like, I can't do anything? And then finally, the last one is ego integrity versus despair. And again, you should have the list handy for this one if you see them. But ego integrity versus despair is basically, have I lived a full life, or do I live and I'm like near the end of my life and I have lots of regrets? So that's Erikson. Again, it's what we carry with us going forward. We are going to resolve that conflict in each stage, but how we resolve it kind of defines us then as we go forward. All right, the last one, because these stage ones are long, I understand. The last one is Kohlberg, and Kohlberg is all about morality. Now, with Kohlberg, this is a really interesting one because with Kohlberg, you can make different stage decisions at any point in your life. Now, a kid may not have the cognitive ability to make a stage 6 decision, but as an adult, I can still make a stage 1 decision. So with the decisions, what that means is that basically is I use my judgment. I evaluate the consequences. I see what the effects of that action is going to be, and I say that's either right or wrong. So in stage 1, which is like kids, it's there's two parts to it. There's pre-conventional, and you have two parts to pre-conventional. The first one is with stage 1 is it's wrong if you get caught. So like a little kid who's got his hand in the cookie jar, now he's caught, he's in the wrong. If he doesn't get caught, he's not going to see that as bad because he didn't get caught. That's stage 1. So like if I am speeding on the freeway, I'm making a stage 1 decision because I'm not getting caught. And so therefore I don't see it as bad. And I don't see it as wrong, even though it is technically against the law. And then stage 2 is more about, it's about how it affects the individual. So like it will my decision. So let's take stealing, for example. Let's say if I steal something, it's a benefit for me. So in stage 2, again, this is pre-conventional. If in stage 2, that means that it's an okay for something for me to do at that point because I'm making a stage 2 decision. I'm saying that it's a benefit to me or the people that I care about, and so therefore it's right. Stealing is okay because it benefits me. Stealing is okay because it benefits the people I love, or something like that. Doesn't actually make it okay, by the way. Stage 3 and stage 4 is about how other people judge you based on your behaviors. So with stage 3, sometimes it's called this is now the conventional stages. Sometimes it's called the good girl, the good boy, nice girl stage, because it's like with kids who are like 7, 8, 9 years old, they want to be good. So if they do something and their family says that's good, then they see it as right. If their family and friends see their actions as bad and they see you're a bad kid, now they see it as wrong. Stage 4 is the same idea, except now it's not just family and friends, it's society. How society will judge your actions, and we do that by making laws. So if something is illegal in stage 4, it's wrong to do. If something is legal in stage 4, it's right to do. And then there is stage 5 and 6. Stage 5 and 6 are the post-conventional stages. And with stage 5 and 6, basically what it is these are the highest level moral thinkings. We can't get there until adolescence, basically, maybe preteen years. And there's two parts to this. Part 5 is called the social contract. And with that one, it's that law. We know that laws are important. But at the same time, if a law is detrimental to an individual, then that law should be broken to help that person. So, for example, let's say your family was starving and you needed food. So you stole food to feed your family. Yes, the law says that stealing is illegal, but at the same time, your family needs this to survive. So, you're evaluating, you're seeing that, yeah, I wouldn't do this normally, but because there's this circumstance, I would. And then finally, stage 6 is called the universal ethics principle. And it really involves empathy and how we can emotionally put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and say, would I want that done to me? And if you're okay with that being done to you, then you doing it you'll see it as okay as well. And so those are the 6 stages of Kohlberg. I know that the stage theories are a lot. Generally, especially because it's an FRQ, maybe you'll get a bullet point with one of the stages. Like you might get autonomy versus role confusion, or autonomy versus shame, or identity versus role confusion, or something like that. Is where I would expect that they might show up in an FRQ, but they might not even show up in the FRQs. Who knows? But again, we got to review because we don't know. Okay, so those are the different stage theories, or the ones that really people wanted me to cover a lot of. Does anybody have any questions regarding the different stage theories in development? Because I feel those were big ones that maybe people needed to cover. It's like in class where everybody's sitting still and like trying not to just look at their phone, and the teacher's just waiting for someone to like answer. That's what this feels like. The 7th stage of psychosocial development, Zach, is generativity versus stagnation. And that's basically the idea that when you're an adult, you want to be seen as like successful. Like I want to be seen as a successful teacher and a successful parent and a successful coach and things like that. And so I'm going to put the work in to get that success. Now, if I don't put that work in and I don't get the success, then I'm just stagnant. Then I just kind of live, but don't really accomplish anything. You're welcome. All right. Anybody else have anything about the stage theories? If not, I'm going to then go into some other stuff. All right. Here we go. All right. Schemas, accommodation, assimilation. These can be applied to both cognitive development and or cognition and also development. A schema is one of those units of thought, but how we develop those units of thought is part of development too. This one I can go through pretty quick. Basically, the idea behind this one is that when we first develop conceptual ideas about things or schemas, they're really, really broad. They're super general because we're kids and we don't know the difference. I'll give you a really great example. When my daughter was just over a year old, she pointed to the neighbor's dog next door, and she said dog. Then she pointed to the neighbor's cat, and she said dog. And then we were out, and she pointed at a cow, and she said dog. Now, eventually, through her experiences, she assimilated them, meaning that she experienced those experiences. That she lived in her life, and she began to see the differences. And she looked, the more she looked at dogs, cats, and cows, the more she began to understand and take in that they aren't exactly the same. And so she assimilated those experiences. She kind of took them inside of her, and she grew from it. From there, she accommodated the schemas, meaning that she changed it. She made it more specific. She said, that's a dog, that's a cow, that's a cat. Initially, it was the schema, all 4-legged animals are dogs. Now that's not necessarily the case. So that's that. Any question about that? Okay. All right. Those ones were the ones that got the most votes. Now I'm going to go into some of the other ones that got less. All right. We're going to go to learning quickly. This one got 6 votes of the people who did vote. So it's another kind of big one. And that's the processes of conditioning. Or no, I'm sorry, reinforcement schedules. Process of conditioning were less. The graph is not very clear. So reinforcement schedules. Okay. Reinforcement schedules are basically through operant conditioning. You can't always give a reinforcement. That's just not realistic in most cases. So with reinforcement schedules, there's 4 different types. And each of these types will make reinforcement occur, but some are stronger than others. So what we have is fixed ratio, variable ratio, fixed interval, variable interval. Fixed ratio means that the conditioning occurs every amount of a time that's done. So, like, let's say we covered this in class. I'm trying to remember the example I used. Let's say that you have. Okay, we're gonna go with variable interval first, because or variable ratio first, because that one's easy for me to explain. So a variable ratio is when reinforcement occurs at random times. The best example of this is a slot machine. You pull the slot machine once, you win. Now you might pull it 10 more times and you might not win. But that 10th time, now you win again. So it might be the very next time that you win, or it might be 20 times more that you win. But it's still, because it does get you to win, it still gets you to do that desired behavior, which is pulling the lever. Fixed ratio is basically when conditioning occurs at a specific number of times. I've got a good example now. Like a discount card where you get 9 stamps and then the 10th one is free. Well, what's the desired behavior? For you to buy something to get those stamps. Now, the reinforcement comes after 10 times of you buying something, of doing that behavior. And every time you have that discount card, it's 10 times after. Fixed interval is when you get reinforcement after a specific amount of time. If you think like Pavlov's dogs or my own dog, he knows that he's going to get fed after a certain amount of time. Every single time you get that reinforcement, you get them to do it. So it's after a specific amount of time. And then variable interval is when reinforcement occurs at random times. So like a good example of that is waiting for a text message. You check your phone. That's desired behavior. You don't get a text message. You don't get a text message. You don't get a text message. And then all of a sudden it comes at a random time. And then it gets you to check your phone again to do that behavior again. Those are the 4 different reinforcement schedules. I was a little scatterbrained on those. I'm sorry. Any questions about those? Okay, no. All right. Good. Okay, so we've covered the stage theories. We've covered reinforcement schedules. We've covered schemas, accommodation, and assimilation. Let's get into some of the other stuff. All right. Some people wanted to know about the optimal arousal theory and the Yerkes-Dodson law. The optimal arousal theory with motivation is that we are motivated to be psychologically stimulated. We're not just motivated by our physiological needs, we're motivated by our need to explore, our need to be curious, and things like that. But the Yerkes-Dodson law says that our performance can suffer if we're over or under stimulated. Think like somebody who's taking a test, let's say the AP test that you're going to be taking next week. If you're here, hopefully you're taking it. And with the AP test, if you wake up and you're all sluggish and you're understimulated, you might have trouble thinking. It might be slow. But if you drink 15 cups of coffee before taking the AP test, your brain is going to be jumping all over the place. And so you are motivated to seek out that stimulation and to do well. But if you're too stimulated, you're not going to do well. And if you're not stimulated enough, you won't do well either. So that's the optimal arousal theory. Again, if people have questions, by all means, please chime in or write a message on the chat. Either way is fine. All right, questions here. All right. So we covered optimal arousal theory. Okay. People wanted to know about baby reflexes. So going back to development, there's 3 main baby reflexes that we have. There's actually more of them, but there's 3 that are the big ones. The first is rooting, and rooting is when the infant is near the nipple of the mother. It instinctively latches on in order to get milk. So that's rooting, and it's like the suckling motion. So that's a baby reflex. The second one is called the Moro reflex. Um, Sorry, I'm just like mentally confusing them for a second. There's the Moro reflex, and the Moro reflex is when a child feels like they're falling, they're going to go like this and spread their arms out like that. It's a way to kind of like, it's that, if a child is basically put right near the ground and gets that falling motion, they kind of do this, and that's the baby reflex. And finally, the last is the Babinski reflex, and that's when the bottom of the foot, if this was an infant's foot, when the bottom of the foot is kind of like rubbed or touched, their toes will kind of extend and widen out like that. It's a reflex that goes away after infancy. Same with the Moro reflex and the rooting as well. Questions about that? Okay. Let's see. Let's go into some of the ones. We've covered a lot of the big ones of what people needed. So now I'm going to start getting into the ones that were received a little bit less votes. Um, uh, okay, biological influences in behavior during adolescence. So there's a couple big ones here. The first, obviously, is puberty. Puberty is a biological change, creates hormonal change, and with hormonal change and hormonal instability, you see emotional instability. One of those behavioral results of puberty. The second uh, um, would be the development or the lack of the development of the prefrontal cortex. So right here, because that doesn't develop until 25, adolescents often will evaluate consequences and make bad judgments anyway. And sometimes it's due to the still developing nature of the frontal lobe. You could try using that with your parents. Good luck. Uh, and then finally, we also have the limbic system. The limbic system is still developing and will still develop until about 21. And because of that, it creates this emotional instability. And, with the amygdala and the hypothalamus and the hippocampus, it's still developing. And so sometimes that can cause emotional reactions that maybe aren't there or that shouldn't be there. So, you combine that with puberty and the hormonal instability, and it's one of these biological explanations for why adolescents sometimes are a little bit emotionally unstable. And I think we all know what we're talking about. And the other one is obviously adolescents are also known for making bad judgments. So those are all biological influences on behavior during adolescence. Questions there? I hope this is helping people. Okay. Let's see. Stages of growth in the womb. This got 4 votes. This won't take long at all. There's 3 of them. It's really, really fast. The first is the zygote. The zygote is the first stage. It's about the first 10 days of pregnancy. It's right after fertilization. And it's, just the splitting of the cells and things like that. Once the zygote has begun to develop organs, it becomes an embryo. And the embryonic stage lasts for the first 8 weeks. And then after that, it is a fetus. And it will be a fetus for the rest of pregnancy. There are certain characteristics of each stage. I doubt you'll need to know them, but who knows? Zygote, obviously, it's just the cells dividing. Embryonic stage is the development of internal organs like brains and hearts, things that are necessary for survival. And then the fetal stage is when you get the development of all the outer organs and the limbs and motor developments and eyes and ears and all of that stuff. So that's the stages, prenatal stages. Questions there? Okay. So we're kind of covering a lot. Now we're getting to the ones that less people needed covered. So now from here, I'm just going to kind of go down the list with the ones with 3 votes. There's a whole bunch of them. The first is the instinct theory of motivation. Instinct theory of motivation is basically that we're motivated based purely on these things built into our DNA. Animals have instincts like this a lot more. Like a salmon who swims upstream, doesn't really understand why, lays its eggs in the pond it was born in, and then dies. Or a whale that travels, thousands of miles in the ocean to migrate every year. That's really instinct. And so different animals are motivated by those instincts. Humans don't really have a whole lot of just kind of natural instincts. Most of our motivations comes from things like drives, or comes from things like incentives, or comes from things like our needs. So that's the instinct theory. I'm gonna go quick through this a little bit. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. And even if I've moved on to something else, I'll come back to it. The next one is the psychological and biological motivation of hunger, I believe. With this one, I'm not going to get into all of this, but think basically you've got your set points. That's the biological part. The set point is that weight that you're at, and you're going to go up when you eat food, and then you're motivated to not eat, and your weight goes back to the set point. Or if you're active, your weight goes below it, and then you become motivated to eat to get back to that set point. Our hypothalamus plays a really big role in that part as well. So you've got like the lateral and ventromedial hypothalamus. If you remember lots of hunger and very minute hunger, that's a kind of way to remember which one is doing certain things. And so lateral hypothalamus is when our stomach is empty and we want to eat more. Ventromedial hypothalamus is when our stomach is full and we want to eat less. And they obviously are influenced by our stomach, by the hormones that get released there, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin when our stomach is empty, we want to eat. Leptin when our stomach is full, we don't want to eat. And then obviously, and there's also one more, the pancreas and insulin. The hormone insulin influences our blood sugar, which motivates us to eat based on the amount of glucose in our blood. But psychologically, we might want to eat through learned preferences, things that we kind of learn make us feel good. We also might stress eat as well. So those are reasons why we might be motivated to eat, even when we're not hungry. And so all of those are kind of explanations for hunger there. All right. The next one is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are 5 main levels to it. Maslow says that for the most part, the bottom levels are our most pressing needs, physiological needs. That's like, do you have enough food? Do you have enough water? Do you have the ability to go to the bathroom? Think like the toilet paper rush when this whole thing started. That's totally physiological right there. After that, you've got safety and security. That's the second stage. That's safety of our property, safety of our family, safety of our person, and so on. Then we've got love and belonging, forming relationships with others. We're motivated to obviously get that need met because we want to have that social connection. Then we have esteem needs, and those esteem needs are basically like I have needs that are going to give me confidence, that people are going to see me as accomplished. They're going to see me as good things. So I have these needs that I need to meet for myself and for other people seeing me this way. And then we have our self-actualization needs at the top of the pyramid, and that's like our ultimate potential. That's us trying to get to the very top, and really kind of being the best individual that we can be, not just necessarily in our job, but also the best person we can be. The most moral, the most friendly, and so on and so forth, the most kind, the most giving, and so on. And so that's all the 5 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All right. A couple people wanted to know about Harry Harlow and physical attachment. Harry Harlow did an experiment where he took monkeys away from their mothers, and basically put them in isolation with 2 types of mothers. One being the wire mother, which had food with it. And so Harlow's like, maybe attachment is based on food. And then the other one was the cloth mother. And the cloth mother was this just like a blanket with like a monkey, like a fake monkey head on it. And what they found is that the infant monkeys were so attached to the cloth mother, they would literally hang on the cloth mother and eat from the wire mother, from the food dispenser of the wire mother, uh, showing that physical attachment is really important to development. Now, when he took that mother away, um, the monkeys went crazy. It's really kind of seen as a ethically questionable experiment. The monkeys went crazy. They had all sorts of issues. Most of them needed to be euthanized. It was just really terrible. But you have there's video footage of even when they weren't taken away from their monkeys, from their mothers. He would bring out this loud banging thing, which would simulate a stressful environment, and the baby monkey would run back to the cloth mother and almost try to protect it, showing that physical attachment is really key to creating those bonds between parent and child in any organism. So I've gone through a bunch of things real quick. Any questions about some of those? Okay. All right. Let's see. Infantile amnesia is really simple. Infantile amnesia is the idea that we don't remember anything up until about 3 years old. Our hippocampus is still developing at that point. And so while we can form memories and while we can learn from them, um, at the same time, it's sorry, I just lost my train of thought. So while we have memories and we can learn from them, we can retain that memory. The memory won't remain with us once we move later into our lives. If you think back to your earliest memories, then what we find is that our earliest memory is about the age of 3 or 4, because we can't form that cognitively. We can't kind of create that representation of an event later in life. We can carry it short term with us to learn from it when we're an infant, but beyond that, we can't. Let's see. Okay. Social connectedness. Social connectedness is how boys and girls play when they're kids and when they play with members of the same gender. It's part of the ideas of the development of gender identity. And basically, what we see is that when boys play together, they're generally it's every boy for themselves, and it's always competitive. And this is then reflected in the ideas of social power as men and women get older later in life. There's always a competition. It's not collaborative. It's everyone for themselves. And there's usually in large groups with mostly on the surface conversation. For girls, and again, this is more generalizations, but this is just what we see for the most part. For girls, they play in smaller groups. There's a lot more collaborative playing, or making sure that they're sharing and playing together and making sure that everybody feels included. It's often not competitive, and so on. And that then is reflected through the ideas of gender stereotypes, and just gender roles as people go forward. And that reflects then some of the issues with social power between men and women as they age and as they get older. A lot of it stems from that. Let's see. All right. Some people want to know about operant conditioning. With operant conditioning, you've got positive and negative reinforcement. And positive and negative punishments. Please remember that positive and negative does not refer to good and bad. They refer to adding and subtracting. So a positive reinforcement could be you're going to get money for doing something. A negative reinforcement is I'm going to remove pain or remove a bad feeling from you or a bad thing from you. That's still a good result, but I'm removing something that's bad. Positive and negative punishment, same idea. If you do something bad and I hit you in the face, that's positive punishment because I'm adding a punch to your face. A negative punishment is obviously if I take something that you want away. Some people wanted to know about primary and secondary reinforcement, and that's real simple. It's that primary reinforcement goes to our innermost drives, water, food. Some people would say maybe sexual behavior, because it refers to reproduction. But all of this is these are primary needs. These are needs that we know are inherently good, things that we want. Um, a secondary reinforcer are things that we have to learn to be good. Best example of this is money. Money, people, when they're coming out of the womb, they're more likely to eat money than anything else. Uh, but with what you have is that with a secondary reinforcer, then you learn that money has value, and then it becomes that reinforcement. It gets you to do a behavior again. Learned helplessness and locus of control. Um, Basically, the idea with learned helplessness is that it's all about your perception. So even if if you can accomplish something, but you think you can't, you still may experience learned helpless. You perceive it that you can't do it. And so a lot of it is tied to like you have learned that you're kind of incompetent, you have low self-efficacy, and or you can't just accomplish something, then you're going to experience that sensation of helplessness. And the more times you do it and the more times it doesn't go well, even if it's for reasons out of your control, then you're still going to view it as I just can't do it. Locus of control is really how you basically learn like about the ideas of control. It's internal and external. If you're an internal locus of control, you're in charge of your own fate. The choices you make and the decisions you make are really what influence the things that happen to you, and you learn that. If you have an external locus of control, you learn and you have this belief, and you learn through that the things that happen to you are due to outside influences, due to fate, due to society, due to other people, just not yourself. All right, that covers everything that was asked about that had 3 or more yeses. We're nearing 4 o'clock anyway. Is there anything, and just include it on the chat now, is there anything that somebody needs covered that I haven't covered yet that really, that is really pressing to them? They're like, I just don't get this idea. If you do, I will totally answer it. If not, those ones where maybe like one person wants it, what unit is social connectedness in? It's in development, Alana. The childhood portion of it. You're welcome. Anything else? Any other concept that I didn't cover? Thank you. I appreciate that. It almost feels like teaching. Not really, not just yet, but almost a little bit. And it's something I haven't done for a while. It's something I like to do. So the next couple of days will be a little bit nice for that. All right. If there isn't any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and say we'll call it a day for this one. I believe tomorrow we're doing the biological stuff. That one's at 2. Just kind of keep that in mind if you're going to come back tomorrow. That one will cover biopsych and sensation and perception. So we'll be talking a lot about brain structures and ways that our senses connect to those brain structures and all the sciencey stuff. So yeah, I'm going to post it, Alana. I'm recording it right now. It takes me a little while for me to post it, but as soon as it's all loaded up, I will get it loaded on the Classroom, and anything that maybe you missed. I covered all the stage theory stuff, so if you came late, you can just watch the YouTube video to look at Piaget, Vygotsky, Erikson, Kohlberg, and all of that stuff. All right, any more questions? You're very welcome, you guys. All right. I will see you guys tomorrow if you show up. And if you've got AP tests coming up, good luck. Okay.